di Indonesia bagian barat seperti Sumatera dan Jawa. Oke, oleh karenanya beberapa pasukan dari pasukan Hindia Belanda yang memihak pada Belanda dikirimkan ke Indonesia bagian timur. Next. Okay, when you watch the movie The Oost, you know that Westerling and Johan de Vries sent to South Celebes to doing like genocide in civilians in there. This is the proof that about the execution of civilians by soldiers from special forces depot in the village of Salomoni in Baru Regency in 12 February 1947. So you see that the civilians ordered to getting together in like in the field, and they gonna shoot them one by one. Okay, the Dutch Nika. The Dutch Nika was also overwhelmed in South Sulawesi. The guerrillas in the area led by young such Andi Sele, Andi Sose, Ali Malaka, Walter Mangusidi, and the others. Made by the Frees considered the situation so very bad in South Sulawesi. The Dutch military units in South Sulawesi were certainly not as numerous in Java, but through tax of achieving security after the Malino Conference also headed for formation of the state is Indonesia. Okay, the massacre was carried out in several stages in the village around the city of Makassar, such Batua, Balom Bodong, Tanjung Bunga, and Kalukwang. According to Anhar Gonggong's notes in the prologues and epilogues, of the 40,000 sacrifice incident, Andi Pangeran Patrani and Andi Mapayuki's house was in Jongaya. They are both descendants of the King of Bone, who sympathized with the republics of Indonesia, and later their names became street names in the city of Makassar. So, on many accounts, Westerling put on a show that is often considered as a military trial in which the truth rests with Westerling. Usually when Westerling came, all the residents were gathered in the fields in the village. Adult males are separate from children and women. Commoners of suspected people or one of the residents were asked to tell where the Republicans guerrillas who were labeled as extremists. Don't forget that little software sounds to the people, whether or not the guerrillas are wanted. If it has frightened the population, there is hope from Westerling that the guerrillas will no longer be sexted by civilians. The troop moved without resting too long after Makassar and its surroundings. They moved south and then east. Once in Bulukumba, they moved north Sinjai. From Sinjai, they moved further north. From Maros, moved north and moved north Sinjai. And then after the pare-pare, they move to areas that are now included in the province of West Sulawesi, like Polewali and Mandar. From there, it moved to Sidenreng and Rapang. There's these two areas later became one district of Sidenreng and Rapang. During those days of Westerling operation, violence and terror were dominant. What Westerling and his troops did, of course, was 11-12 with Hans Christoffel and Overste van Dillen and Marsus troops in their action in Gayo Alas during the colonial area. They're just different times. So not until 2 weeks after the arrival of the special force, the situation in Sulawesi changed completely. And of course, by leaving the estimated number of victims in the thousand, where the figure of 40,000 people has been ringing for decades as the number of Westerling victims in Sulawesi. They are already names for 40,000 Soul Streets, 40,000 Souls Monument, and 40,000 Souls Battalion. Okay, next, please. Okay, this is same place and same year about the Westerling incident in Baru. Okay, next. Okay, this you can see that all eldest male in their village getting around in the fields, and the Westerling will make some genocide for them. Okay, and a number of victims of the Westerling massacre are built up in the town square of Baru in January 1947. This the photos smoke billows over the coastal village across the river in Baru as a result of the burning of houses by the Dutch in January 1947. Okay, next. These photos burning the house of a village head in Baru. Okay, next. About the movie. In the film, what's interesting is that Johan doesn't only think about what he did, its impact, also the moral and military justification, but he acted and accepted the consequences of his moral compass. Johan attitude is a good mirror for the Dutch history. Okay, next, and we got in a deeper discussion. Oh, one a question about this when the Oost. Why? Of course, there is a three step to answer this. First, military violence. We don't think that only military violence in Indonesia, only in South Sulawesi, and named uh, became one incident over there, a Westerling incident. but also before a thousand of Westerling incident, there are many kind of genocide, massacre, and execution of civilians. So that military violence became epistemic violence. So um, from epistemic violence started from the power. According to Foucault, relationship between power and discourse of knowledge gonna be important things to answer this. Decolonization course in needed to clean up the remaining colonial ruins. But then I saw the term decolonization being used to name a research project in the Netherlands funded by the Dutch government. It is surprising is that the project was initiated primarily by Dutch academic involving colonial heritage in the institution because of this, the meaning of the term decolonization changed completely. It loses its spirit and the progressive meaning. So if we use the Yaks Lekong thought that if verdranging activity censors and therefore harbors painful memories, then verwerfung deception tend to turn troubled past into the hostile delusion. Oke, jadi um, kesan saya setelah melihat melihat film ini adalah kenapa kita perlu membicarakan wacana dekolonial gitu. Mulai dari military violence atau kekerasan dalam militer yang kita bisa artikan dengan kekerasan fisik. Oke, jadi berbicara kekerasan fisik atas respon kolonial itu tidak semata-mata kita hanya melihat satu peristiwa seperti peristiwa Westerling di Sulawesi Selatan, tapi juga bertahun-tahun sebelum peristiwa Westerling itu terjadi, banyak ribuan bahkan jutaan atau miliaran orang yang menjadi korban dari military violence atau kekerasan militer. Dan ini akan berujung kepada epistemic violence atau kekerasan epistemik yang itu didasari oleh power jika menurut Foucault, atau kita bisa sebut dengan relasi kuasa, yaitu relasi antara kuasa dan diskursus ilmu pengetahuan. Dan sebetulnya saya sedikit meragukan gitu kenapa dekolonial ini selalu sebetulnya ini baru saja digalakan akhir-akhir ini dengan beberapa institusi di Belanda ataupun di Indonesia yang itu membiayai tentang penelitian dekolonisasi atau kejahatan perang dan lain-lain. Sebetulnya isu dekolonials ini perlu untuk meruntuhkan sisa-sisa bangunan kolonial yang telah runtuh gitu. The construction of colonial is not fully disappear. Jadi bangunan kolonial itu tidak sepenuhnya menghilang gitu atau sudah bersih. Masih banyak reruntuhan-reruntuhan kolonial yang masih belum tersentuh dengan isu dekolonial. Jadi ini perlu. When I watch the Oost, actually it's so bravely movie in I don't know in Netherlands maybe. So maybe Mr. Richard will explain more about the Oost after I discussion about the decolonialization a little bit about decolonial. Okay. So this is the number of victims of the Westerling incident in South Sulawesi. From Westerling, they only said that the victim of the Westerling incident only 600, and the army only 1,700. But the historians from Sulawesi, South Sulawesi, and Hargonggong, um, he gives the uh, a biggest number, no, not biggest, but a bigger than before, like Westerling said and Army said. Anhar Gorongong said the victim of the Westerling incident is 10,000, and Kahar Muzakar had the biggest perception and biggest thought that the victim of the Westerling incident in South Sulawesi reaching the 40,000 victims. Okay, next. Okay, thank you. Maybe we can discuss after this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ray, for your presentation. Makasih banyak, Ray, buat presentasinya tadi. Mendalam dan juga cukup panjang. Jadi, Ray tadi pertama nyampein dulu mengenai perang revolusi ya di Indonesia dari sejak sekitar tahun 1945 hingga 1949. Mungkin itu untuk pengantar juga bagi mereka yang belum pelajari lagi mengenai perang revolusi ini. Menarik tadi yang disampaikan sama Ray dari awal sampai akhir ya mengenai fase-fase, kemudian mengenai korban. Nah, ini menarik mengenai penelitian soal dekolonialisasi ini, baik di Indonesia atau di Belanda, karena mungkin karena mengenai penelitian ini, karena mengenai penelitian ini, aku juga sebagai persiapan kemarin ini mencari buku ini. Ada dari Girls of Indies, Serdadu Belanda di Indonesia 1942 sampai 1945 sampai 1950. Mungkin kalau misalnya ada teman-teman yang tertarik soal serdadu atau mengenai catatan mengenai tentara Indonesia di Belanda selama era revolusi, bisa cari buku ini. Mungkin kalau ada versi online lebih murah lagi, mungkin kalian bisa cari sendiri. Gitu. Jadi di buku ini juga sebenarnya ada dibahas sedikit sih mengenai riset-riset atau penelitian mengenai era dekolonialisasi ini. Mungkin kita bisa paham gitu ya kenapa kalau misalnya dari pihak Belanda, pemerintah Belanda gitu tidak melakukan penelitian karena ini memang cukup kelam bagi mereka. Tapi yang menarik dari pengantar buku ini adalah justru ketika sekitaran tahun 2010-an ini, dari sejak tahun 2014 sampai tahun 2020 itu ada ajakan dari Menteri Luar Negeri Belanda, siapa namanya aku lupa, di buku ini ada ini kalau misalnya kalian baca. Nah, dari Menteri Luar Negeri Belanda Bert Koenders yang menginisiasi penelitian di kolonial ini. Jadi dia mengajak baik dari Indonesia maupun Belanda untuk melakukan penelitian mengenai kasus-kasus yang mirip seperti Westerling, atau di Bekasi itu ada Rawa Gede, kemudian di Sumatera juga ada yang cukup terkenal atau misalnya jadi headline berita gitu mengenai pembantaiannya. Nah, tapi justru dari pemerintah Indonesia sendiri menolak mengenai pembahasan. Jadi dari pemerintah Indonesia sendiri ingin mengarah atau berpikiran ke depan saja. Jadi tidak mau, belum ada political interest dari pihak Indonesia sendiri untuk melakukan penelitian era 19 jadi sekitaran era-era perang ini. Jadi yang menarik adalah pada saat era ini, era Presiden Jokowi ini justru political interest-nya adalah untuk tidak membahas mengenai era 1945 sampai 1950, di mana kebanyakan korbannya adalah rakyat sipil dari Indonesia. Meskipun kita tahu di Belanda misalnya terkenal ada era bersiap, di mana di situ ditulis terutama catatan mengenai orang-orang keturunan Eropa, Tionghoa yang dibantai oleh milisi-milisi lokal dan juga rakyat-rakyat yang nasionalismenya sedang tinggi. Saat itu. Dan maaf dari Belanda yang ingin tentang pembantaian dilakukan oleh tentara di Indonesia. Jadi nah, kemudian juga mengenai yang tadi terakhir disampaikan oleh Ray itu juga cukup menarik. Mungkin kalau saya mau bertanya itu lebih mengenai korban ya. mengenai korban itu disampaikan oleh Ray itu ada salah satu angka mengenai jumlah korban jiwa yang mencapai 40.000. Itu salah satunya dari Kahar Muzakar. Kalau nggak salah Kahar Muzakar ini nanti terlibat pemberontakan DITI ya, kalau tidak salah. Jadi kalau menurut beberapa sejarawan juga sebenarnya sudah ada yang menentang mengenai penggunaan angka 40.000 itu ya. Dari Mr. Muhammad Nasir juga sudah menentangnya, menganggapnya itu sebagai propaganda Republikan belaka saja. Oke, mungkin oke. So tadi before I had make a very good presentation about the Indonesian National Revolution from 1945 to 1949. It's very good to hear for you who haven't read much or do a lot of research in this era. This era marked many armed conflict between Indonesia and Dutch, not just from military but also in civilian. We know that in Dutch there is masa bersiap, in part of their historiography, in which in that era, in masa bersiap, there is a lot of violence between pro-Dutch and anti-Dutch civilian in Indonesia. Many victims of that violence is especially in Indo-European, keturunan Belanda, and also Tionghoa, Chinese population, and other people who is suspected to have a pro-Dutch motivation. Including maybe in this case is the revolusi sosial in Sumatra and Kalimantan. This part of history is usually being used for propaganda by the Dutch at the time for their justification to return stability and order in Dutch East India. The same reason which being used by Westerling. If you read many of his commentary, he said that he only want to bring control and order in South Celebes, but in fact, not many innocent people are also being casualties in this event. He said around 600, the army say around 1,000 to around 10,000. Republican says around 10,000 to 15,000, and some propaganda say it's well above 40,000, which is sometimes very obscure. Sangat bisa ditertawakan sekali 40.000 korban jiwa itu. Okay. Maybe that from you, Ray. We can go next to Mr. Richard. Richard, you want to show us your presentation maybe? Can you hear me, Richard? I since several minutes ago, I fear that my voice and Ray voices cannot be heard by you. Can you hear us?
Okay. Well, in the first place, good evening. Maaf ya, saya harus bicara bahasa Inggris karena bahasa Indonesia saya bukan lancar. Just to be more clear, I like to talk English.
Maybe I can translate some of.
Yeah, you can translate. Okay.
You can start your from now.
Okay, in the first place, this meeting was actually the result of a previous meeting where we talked about the movie about the Babu. They call me Babu was the name. And after that meeting, we start discussing, and some people have seen the film The East. That was actually a little bit a surprise because I was not aware that the film was possible to see the film in Indonesia. I didn't know that. And of course, when the film came out here in the Netherlands, there was a lot of discussion about it because in the Netherlands, the people now, the generation now, they don't agree with colonialization. They are now merely on the side of the independence. They don't see Bung Karno as a war criminal. They see him as a freedom fighter who just came up for their rights, because colonialism is suppression, and that is not a good thing in this world anymore. And the first sign of that, the way of thinking, the mindset of the colonialist is very clearly shown in how the Dutch history books call these war in Indonesia. Here they are mentioned politional actions, so police actions to maintain law and order. But you can ask yourself, whose law and whose order? because it was not in Holland, and who gave them the right to say, okay, we are coming back and we have to restore order. Uh, I must emphasize that since the 1930s, there was a lot of there were a lot of Indonesian students studying in Holland, and the independence of Indonesia, or actually the independence of all the colonies in the world, were a political issue. That was a humanitarian period. People were getting aware that colonialism is not actually a good thing, that people have the right to be independent, to form their own country, especially when those so-called colonies are on the other side of the world. I mean, and what was the reason that the Dutch did not accept the independence of Indonesia, and why they started the so-called politional actions? That is because the Netherlands, after the Second World War, after the Germans left, the Netherlands was bankrupt. There was no industry left in the Netherlands, and Netherlands was poor. So they needed they needed the Indonesian products, the benefits from the colonials. They wanted the oil, the gold, the rubber, the coffee, the spices. That started everything, and that is how the Netherlands became a rich country. Not only the Netherlands, it is actually a movement from the Western Europeans who all came to Africa, South America, Asia to say, this is our country, and they get rich from the benefits of the country. Actually, if you look at it now, it is robbery. They they completely rob the country. They come from Europe and they say, this is our country and you have to listen to us. That is now a little bit strange to conclude, that you can say a country on the other side of the world belongs to us here in Europe. In the past, that was logical thinking. The people thought that they were bringing prosperity, and they were bringing education, they were bringing culture. They had all kind of arguments to say, okay, what we are doing is actually very good for the people over there. You can discuss that argument, of course, but that was the way that they kept peace of mind, that yeah, we all benefit from it, they benefit, we give them schools, we build schools, education. But they never mention that the situation in the colonial period was very discriminating. You can compare it with the situation in South Africa before South Africa became independent. There was segregation between the Dutch, people with Dutch blood, or people who are Indonesian but very important families. They were called gelijkgestelden, equalized. They have the same rights as the Dutch. They were allowed to go to Dutch schools, Dutch education, etc. And you have, of course, the people who have no connections, and they were called the pribumi, or the, how you called it, the indigenous people, the original inhabitants. And they felt that they were there to help them to develop themselves. Well, if you look at the world history, then you compare the history of Indonesia in the time of the great kingdoms, and like Mataram or Sriwijaya or Mojopahit, then you see that the development of those kingdoms were on a very high level. Indonesia and the culture of Indonesia, the whole archipelago, is very developed in an early stage before Europeans were reasonably developed. People don't know that. They don't look at it. They think that Europe is number one and the rest follows. But actually, if you look at the facts, you see that other people, other cultures were earlier and highly developed. Look at the Mayas, the Incas, name it, and you know it. So this is of this knowledge is of course now very common in Holland. People know that. And that is why it starts a discussion about the colonial period, and especially it's connected here in the Netherlands with the fact that the Moluccan community who came from the formal Dutch military, the KNIL, they are now in Holland for 70 years. So 70 years ago, after the independence of Indonesia, They resisted. They were on the side of the Dutch. They fought on the side of the Dutch. But don't forget that those military men, they were just looking for a job. They didn't volunteer to fight a war against Indonesia. They enlisted to the KNIL to have a job to feed their families. And then as a soldier, they were sent in the war. Yeah, and of course, people don't actually realize what they are doing. I mean, now we have almost 2 years the pandemic in the world with the COVID. And you see in all the countries, there's a lot of rioting. There are people who are opposing the COVID, they are opposing vaccination. People lose stability because the future is uncertain. How can you imagine that the situation was in Indonesia after the World War? I mean, first you have the occupation by the Dutch, then the Japanese came, they gave the independence later, and then the Dutch came back. But can you imagine how it is that if you live for so long time in so much stress that people don't act reasonably anymore? And that also goes the same for governments who give orders, because one surprising thing aspect on the movie was that Captain Westerling had a carte blanche. He got permission from a very high level person, because the Dutch officers in the movie, you could see that they he was a captain, but the generals didn't have to follow the orders of the generals because he had special orders from himself. And I don't know if people who have seen the movie can remember that there is a scene that they have to go to an airfield. And they had a small discussion at the airport with a man in Dutch uniform. And for me, it is still uncertain who was that person, because if you see at the uniform, it looks to me that it was Prince Bernhard. He was the supreme command of the Dutch military during the World War. It started in London, of course. He was married to the Dutch Queen, but Captain Westerling got permission, not the official permission from the officers, the high officers who were in charge of the military, but he had a special order, a carte blanche from somebody very high. And if it is true that it was Prince Bernhard, or he knew about it, then it's also obvious that actually they struggled to keep Indonesia because of economic benefits. Indonesia brought wealth to the Dutch, and after the World War, Dutch Netherlands was bankrupt. During that war, there were, of course, more things getting clear to the Dutch people. There people who were drafted for the military service in the East, there are a lot of people who rejected that. They ended up in jail because if you are enlisted and you refuse to show up, you can get sentenced to jail. On the second place, the most soldiers who came there, and I mean from Holland, they well, most of the people who were very simply educated. They come from smaller cities, smaller towns. They didn't know anything not much about the East, the colonies, and they were dropped there after a very short training period. Then they suddenly dropped in Indonesia, in the tropics. They didn't really know what they were doing there. It was a complete different world, and that's why they were very uncertain. So they trusted their officers, and the officers give them commands and they followed them. And that is very usual in the army. If you are a soldier, you listen to the commands of your officers and you don't think about it if it is just or not, you just do it. I mean, that's the system in the army. Later, they start thinking about, if this what we are doing, is it correct? You know that probably you heard there were some soldiers, Dutch soldiers, who deflected and went to the Indonesian side. A very well-known name in Indonesia is Ponke Prinsen. Ponke Prinsen was a Dutch soldier, and during the fights he realized that what they were doing was not justified or not correct. So he moved over to the Indonesian troops. And he stayed in Indonesia till he died in the 70s or 80s, I don't know. But His name, Ponke Prinsen, was also very discussable in the Netherlands because they saw him as a traitor. And that is a bit strange because he realized that what they were doing is actually not just, it was not correct, it was not a war, they were not enemies, they were fighting to maintain the economic benefits. And that's why he joined the Indonesian troops and stayed there. And that knowledge about the injustice of the colonial war, or they call police actions, that it actually was a war for territory and for economic benefits, and that there was a lot of discrimination, there was segregation in the colonial period. That information came later, and that was well known. And maybe in the beginning we had the same situation in the Dutch. I mean, the Dutch with high positions, they also treated the Dutch with lower positions the same way. They were also, in the eyes of some Dutch, they were just minor people, and the nobility and the peasants. It was actually not equal like now in the democratic life, and everybody is equal. At that time, there was also segregation in the Dutch, in the Netherlands, among rich families, poor families, peasants, religious as well, Catholic, Protestants, a lot of segregation. And so later they realized that that was not good. But what is also very important, that is why actually eventually the international community forced the Dutch to stop the war. That was that in the beginning of the Second World War, when only the British were involved in the World War with the Germans, they had the Conference of Yalta. The Conference of Yalta was with Khrushchev, Chamberlain, and Churchill. Oh, Roosevelt, excuse me, Roosevelt, Khrushchev, and Churchill. Churchill, England, America, Roosevelt, and the Russians never had a colony. They were independent themselves. I mean, yet the independence war of the America, yeah, against the British, and you had, of course, the Russian Revolution. And then Churchill came, and as I remember well, that as well as America and Russia said, okay, we are willing to help you, Europe. We are willing to help, to support, to fight with you. But there's one very important condition, and that is that after we liberate and the war is over, you give freedom to the colonies. Yeah, you abandon your colonies and you give the people their freedom. That was a hard demand in the Conference of Yalta. Then after the war, when the atomic bomb had fallen and Japanese capitulated, then the Dutch said, okay, we made that agreement, but our country is bankrupt. And so we have to restore our position because we need the money and we need the benefits, but we cannot declare a war. So they call it a politional action, police, maintaining law and order. Well, of course, that is a hoax. I mean, how can you do that? But anyway, the sympathy for the Dutch to maintain the colonialism uh, declined. There was no sympathy anymore, and eventually the international community, especially America, when they provided the Marshall loans for to build up the countries, they said, if you don't give Indonesia independence, we'll stop helping you with building up your country. And that actually resulted in the negotiation that they could maintain New Guinea till 1963, and after 63, New Guinea became Indonesia as well, and the people had to leave. The second thing what is very important to know and to understand is that most people who were moved to Holland, they were never been in Holland. They were born and raised in Indonesia for generations. There was a group of people with Dutch blood, the Indos, but there are also two groups. You have one group who were recognized by their Dutch father, so they have the position as Dutch equalized. But you also had mixed-blooded couples where the children were not recognized by the Dutch, and they lived as Indonesians in the kampong with their Indonesian families. But after the war, everybody had to leave, and that was also very understandable, because as I have learned is that during the negotiations between Indonesia, Bung Karno, and the Dutch government, the Dutch demanded a lot. They made a lot of demands. Okay, we give you independence, but you have to do blah 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 blah. And as I remember well, as I understand well, at a certain moment, Bung said, "Okay, if you make so much demands for your people, just take them home." And I can really understand that because Malawan truth, this is your country, in Indonesia, and then the Dutch coloniators, they say, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that. I can understand the Bung said, okay, if you start yeah, whining like that, just take them away, just move them home and forget about it. But the Dutch, they had the opportunity to stay in Indonesia. They were allowed to stay there if they want to become Indonesians. And a lot of people did that. But the majority of the people who left Indonesia, they also did it because of economical reasons. Because there they had property, they had a good income, they had a good job. And they were afraid, of course, that after the independence, they had nothing, they were poor. So they thought, we go to Holland. But that was a cold shower as well, because in Holland, the country was still broken. It was still suffering from the Second World War. So they were actually not really welcome here. There was a lot of people who thought, okay, the people from Indonesia come here, but who are they? What do they know? And the people from Indonesia who came to Holland, they thought that, okay, we are Dutch, we have Dutch nationality or equalized to the Dutch. So we're going back to Holland and we are welcome. But they were not, because there were so much problems in the Netherlands that there was no attention for the people who came from the Dutch colonies. So they had to survive on their own way, and they lost all perspective. So there's also a very big psychological damage for them. They thought, okay, we can leave Indonesia, go to Holland. They call it repatriation. And there's the word going back to your fatherland, re and patria, patria's father, go back to your fatherland. But most people who came here have never been here. They know about Holland from the schools, the history and the geography, but that's all. They were Indonesians. Or you cannot say Indonesians because that's a nationality, but they were partly Javanese or orang Sunda or orang Batak or like me, orang Maluku. Maybe we had other position, but we know our inheritance. We know where we come from, and especially we are not white. And that is what you see nowadays in the post-colonial period. We have a lot of people from abroad coming into Holland, and people don't mind, but you're recognizable as a foreigner. They know they if you see you, they say, "Oh, you're an outlander, or you're from another country," because we're not white. And that's the first definition. They see your identification. You see, oh, you're colored, you have colored, or your nose is a little bit other, different, so you're not Dutch. And that was, of course, strange because we're not Dutch, we're not Indonesian. So what are we? We're just humans. And that is also very important. And there's also one of the things that you can hear in Indonesia, in Holland, that in the 90s, when people from other countries came more often to Holland, the younger people at school has to make a choice, because people ask you, where are you coming from? Where do you come from? Because you're not Dutch, you're not white. And I talk about people from Morocco, Suriname came here, Turkey, all over the world they came over here. And of course, because we're colored, they ask, are you Dutch? Where do you come from? Then, of course, we cannot say we're Dutch. We have a Dutch passport. But then say, yeah, we're originally from Indonesia. My parents are from Indonesia. Oh, Indonesia, interesting. So you are very much forced now in the younger generations to define your identity. What are you? They always ask you, what are you? Where are you originally coming from? And that gave a boost, because there was a period of time that also were those people, the descendants from people from Indonesia, the parents also had a trauma, and the parents could not tell much about their past, about their history. So a lot of younger people, the second generation and the third generation, they were confronted with the fact that outside and at school they were seen as foreigners because they were tinted, they were brown, but they didn't know about where it came from. So that is the context in this whole story. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard. You have explained to us a lot perspective from the Dutch, especially Dutch Indo, about what they're thinking happened in Indonesia during the National Revolution. I like a lot from what you said, uh, and I agree with many of your point, especially like this one. I agree that colonialism is a suppression for a certain people, especially the people in the colony, like Dutch to Indonesia. So the Indonesian feels it was a suppression, and I was quite shocked when you said that the Sukarno was being held as a freedom fighter, because what I read from several books or notes that he was seen as a terrorist during the time during the National Revolution.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends on what side you are. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
for the Dutch, Sukarno was a threat because he had the
For
people
the
behind him.
order, yeah, Sukarno was a threat.
He was for the Dutch interest, he was a threat, of course. But if you look at a human being, I think he's a hero.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Yeah,
For many Indonesian, he was also a hero
yeah,
because
he is a hero.
there will be no
Yeah,
proclamation of independence.
of course. He came up for his people. He declined colonization and suppression, and actually he opened the doors for all the colonies to become independent, because
Yeah,
he was the one who put it in motion. And after the Indonesia became independent, all the other colonies, from the English, from the Germans, from the French, they also had the same. And
yeah,
that's and Bun Karno, he was also the first one who made a meeting with all the African nations.
yes.
So if you look at that perspective, I think
Yeah,
he is a very important man who changed the world.
yes.
And of course,
And
the
now,
losers, the losers don't like it. But to be honest, he's
yes.
right. Yeah,
And you say that many Indonesian also came to Dutch to study. Unfortunately, Bung Karno can go to Netherlands because he has some financial issue. But other famous people from Indonesia, revolution hero like Mr. Bung Hatta and Tan Malaka, they all go to Netherlands to study in there, and they learn
yeah,
a lot, and then they become a leader in here thanks from the education in the Netherlands. So
exactly.
that's why maybe an irony, right? Do you agree with me? Yeah. Maybe some irony because many of the national leaders learn from the Dutch, from the education, master in the law school, in the economic school. Mr. Hatta was a great economic guy, you know. And then also one point which I found very interesting, you hear that right, but before in the film Scan, which Richard say, there is a scene when Westerling, Fridge, and Samuel came to the airport. You see it, the scene, yeah, yeah. When he say that before it there was a meeting between Westerling and some military leader that he will have free reign, free action,
Yeah.
whatever he do, you have the support from that guy, which he's with what like beneath him is only his bed. Yeah. And you said that it was Prince Bernard, right? The crown
Well,
prince.
that is not sure, but if I look at
Maybe you
his
can do
uniform,
more research about that, Richard, about is really Prince Bernard was that, because if Prince Bernard the one who give them free reign, that maybe can cause some uh, new news in Netherlands, in the international community, because you know prince from the royal family actually give support to Westerling to do whatever he want to do to restore order. That may be cause some new tagline in the news. Maybe
well,
Ray and me we can do some other research with other friends about that.
well, if you realize that the Dutch royal family has the most shares of Shell oil, maybe you can
No, we
understand
can.
what's happening.
I don't want to make a statement that may insult or offend the royal family, because I'm just a proletar. I'm just a rakyat jelata in here.
Yeah, but
And
there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions.
Yes, as you also said that the fighting, the Dutch, what they do in the Dutch East Indies for economic benefit. Yes, I recognize that there was a slogan. I forgot the Dutch word, but if the Dutch East Indies is lost, the doom is coming. There is some kind of slogan in there in the Netherlands, if I'm not wrong. There was
I
some slogan in there.
I,
If
I don't
the
know about.
India was lost, the doom is coming or something like that. Maybe we can see, maybe we can read more about that. I remember it reading in the internet, but I think it's true because the Dutch East India was a very rich in resource for the Netherlands. Many people said that they built dikes, the Great Dikes in Netherlands. Netherlands was very famous about its dikes, of course, and its irrigation system. The first project was being built around 1930s. I think that came that all of this financial came from the Dutch East Indies, of course, because they made Dutch East Indies because they were broken from the Napoleonic War, right?
Yeah.
They need money. They need money to rebuild their kingdom to expand, and they get the money from the Dutch East Indies. And also another statement you make that many people from Indonesia during the repatriation was not being welcome, and you can see it in the movie also from the troops that are not being welcome. Some of the line in there when they will being welcome is that they call them Nazis, some kind
Yeah.
like that. And also I read in a newspaper that some diaspora like from Maluku are being given poor treatment and poor house to for their accommodation. If I'm not wrong, is that true that many people, especially even from Maluku, which we know that Maluku and Minahasa were very loyal to the Dutch kingdom?
Mm.
Is it
Yeah,
true
they were
that
soldiers. Yeah, they were. They were also, yeah, they were very loyal to the Dutch for some reason. Because don't forget the Dutch started coming when they come to Indonesia, Nusantara. Actually, they started. They took over the Portuguese islands. They started in Ambon for the spices. In that time, the spices are very rare in Europe, and they could buy it from the Arabs. The Arabs were the traders for the spices, and they brought it to Europe. Because don't forget, the Arabs, they had the south of Spain and Portugal was Arab territory, and they were the traders, and they introduced the spices also to preserve food. Don't forget
yes?
that in that time, if you want to sail the ships, you had a disease
Yes,
called
belong to
scurvy.
the Arab traders, yes, yes.
Yeah, you have
So
to
yes,
preserve the
that's
food.
why the Europeans started the colonization for the
Exactly.
Americans.
Yes. And that is they came for the spices, and
Okay.
from
Maybe
Ambon they,
other people also want to join our discussion, Richard. Yes.
yeah.
Maybe is that maybe we can open the question if there people want to ask question. Jadi kalau misalnya dari kalian ingin menyampaikan pernyataan ya, pernyataan juga nggak apa-apa sih menurut aku kalau misalnya ada yang tidak disetujui dari pernyataannya Ray, Richard atau dari aku bisa. Yeah. So if there anyone want to ask question or make a statement, please we open for that. Jika ada yang ingin bertanya, mungkin tadi aku juga belum terjemahin ya beberapa poin yang disampaikan Richard. Kalau misalnya teman-teman ada yang mungkin belum paham, jadi tadi Richard membahas panjang lebar juga. Ini aku terjemahin sambil nunggu pertanyaan atau pernyataan dari kalian ya. Kalau misalnya ingin bertanya mengenai diskusi dekolonial ini, jadi Richard tadi panjang lebar menyampaikan mengenai pandangan dia mengenai proses dekolonialisasi juga keadaan-keadaan yang ditampilkan di film. Ini misalnya tadi ada yang dia bilang itu mengenai kolonial adalah supresi ya, kolonial is suppression. Jadi kolonialisme itu adalah suppression. Apa kira-kira yang tepat dari bahasa Indonesia? Supresi aja terlalu KBBI gitu. Penekanan gitu ya, ditekan. Jadi kolonialisme itu adalah penekanan terhadap orang-orang asli di koloninya. Richard juga tadi bilang kalau misalnya sekarang banyak orang-orang di Belanda yang mulai menganggap Soekarno sebagai seorang pejuang kebebasan. Kalau sebelumnya yang aku dengar itu masih Muhammad Hatta lah ya, masih dianggap sebagai pejuang kebebasan. Tapi kalau Soekarno itu di beberapa catatan dari itu yang aku baca, dia masih beberapa masih menganggap dia sebagai orang yang mengacaukan ketertiban di Hindia Belanda. Kemudian tadi juga ada poin disampaikan Richard, kalau misalnya dalam salah satu skin yang dia lihat itu ada ketika Westerling, Samuel dan Fritz pergi ke bandara dan mereka bertemu dengan seseorang yang diduga di itu memotretkan Pangeran Bernhard, yaitu putra mahkota dari kerajaan Belanda. Menurut aku itu menarik, mungkin lain kali bisa karena sekarang kan lagi banyak studi dekolonialisasi dan juga didukung oleh pemerintah Belanda ya. Mungkin teman-teman ada yang ingin mencari apakah benar itu yang dimaksud orang di bandara itu adalah Pangeran Bernhard atau bagaimana. Bisa kalau misalnya teman-teman tertarik, itu poin yang bagus dari Richard, karena aku juga nggak sadar kalau misalnya itu bisa jadi Pangeran Bernhard ya, karena siapa lagi gitu yang bisa memberikan seseorang kebebasan untuk melakukan apapun yang dia mau untuk memulihkan keamanan. Oke. Kemudian tadi juga salah satu poin dia mengenai mengenai kenapa Belanda melakukan semua ini, ya tentu saja untuk kepentingan ekonomi gitu. Belanda membutuhkan uang untuk memulihkan negaranya setelah hancur setelah Perang Dunia Kedua. Kemudian juga banyak orang Indonesia yang sebelumnya belajar ke Belanda sekitar 1920, 1930, menuntut ilmu di sana dan kembali ke Indonesia menjadi pemimpin seperti yang tadi aku bilang, ada Bung Hatta, ada Tan Malaka, dan juga yang lainnya pemimpin-pemimpin Indonesia yang sebelumnya belajar ke Belanda. Dan tapi kemudian beberapa orang yang dari Indonesia kemudian pergi lagi ke Belanda, mereka tidak mendapatkan perlakuan yang cukup mengenakan gitu ya, karena setelah perang mereka sedang dalam depresi ekonomi setelah Perang Dunia Kedua. Jadi begitu, mungkin Ray ada tanggapan sambil nunggu teman-teman tadi dari diskusi. Segan, mungkin kalau misalnya ingin bertanya bagaimana dari teman-teman mengenai konflik Hindia Belanda ini, terutama studi yang terutama tema yang kita bahas ini mengenai dekolonialisasi ya. Okay, from Beniko Surya Wibawa. Okay, Nico. Sorry, I can turn on the microphone. I want to ask earlier that Richard mentioned about Sukarno as a fighter and as a terrorist. And in one of the Oostins, Sukarno is depicted as a Japanese lackey. Then why didn't the Dutch overthrow Sukarno since the beginning of the Dutch arrival? In more detail, what was the difficulty of the Dutch in capturing Sukarno? Okay. This is quite interesting from Nico. Which asked about the Dutch and about Sukarno in particular. Richard, you want to answer this?
Sorry, I don't know about the details, but of course I can, because when the Japanese capitulated or surrendered, they appointed Sukarno as the leader of the independence Indonesia. The Japanese supported that. And Sukarno, of course, acted like it, and the Dutch didn't like it. I think that the Dutch expected Sukarno to give it to Holland or something, I don't know, but a Japanese lackey, yeah, that's that is just the conclusion of some Dutch people, I think, I don't know. But yeah, he was not kept detained by the Japanese, but the Japanese had also another strategy, another tactics. And Sukarno was a big, powerful person in Indonesia, also during the Japanese occupation, of course. And maybe that is the reason why they mentioned him a Japanese lackey, but I don't see him as a lackey. But yeah, I didn't know that. I don't share that opinion.
Okay, thank you Richard for your answer. Mungkin aku artiin dulu tadi buat teman-teman lain. Aku ingin bertanya, sebelumnya Richard memberitahu kalau misal Soekarno digambarkan sebagai seorang pejuang kebebasan juga sebagai teroris, dan di salah satu skin atau cuplikan di film The Oost, Soekarno dipresentasikan sebagai kolaborator Jepang. Dan kemudian pertanyaan dari Niko, kenapa Belanda tidak menggulingkan saja Soekarno semenjak mereka datang? Dalam detailnya, kenapa Belanda mengalami kesulitan gitu untuk menangkap Soekarno? Mungkin begini kan, aku jawab aja mungkin ya, karena aku juga studinya mengenai sejarah militer. Kalau misal Niko ingat, mungkin kan pas aksi polisional kedua itu, Soekarno sudah ditangkap dan diasingkan ke Bangka ya, Bangka atau Belitung, aku lupa, sekitaran Bangka. Tapi karena dari jawabanku ya, karena semangat nasionalisme sudah tinggi, Dan meskipun Soekarno ditangkap, tapi kita tetap bisa lihat kalau misalnya banyak tokoh-tokoh militer seperti Sudirman, dan juga kita tahu di Sumatera ada PDRI, jadi mereka tetap melanjutkan perlawanan. Bagaimana Niko mungkin bisa, jadi kalau menurut aku sih poin ya, meskipun Soekarno itu ditangkap, tapi semangat nasionalisme dan juga untuk merdeka dari orang Indonesia sendiri sudah terlampau besar. Jadi meskipun Soekarno ditangkap, itu tidak terlalu berefek banyak bagi Belanda. Dan kalau misalnya dibunuh, mungkin menurutku ya justru akan semakin besar ya semangat perlawanannya untuk tetap merdeka, untuk ingin merdeka. So I think we know that Soekarno was being captured during the second politional action in Yogyakarta with his minister and with Mr. Hatta. But there is an emergency government in West Sumatra under Mr. Syafruddin, and also in Java, in Central and East Java, General Sudirman is still doing his guerrilla war against the Dutch. So even when Sukarno was being captured, the spirit of freedom and nationalism in Indonesian civilian is still very, very high. They don't care that Sukarno was being captured. They keep fighting against the Dutch because they want to be free. I think some kind like that. Are you agree with me, Richard?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I mean, you can capture Sukarno, but you cannot, by capturing Sukarno, you cannot capture the, how you mean it, you cannot capture the will to become independent.
Yes,
By capturing the leader, you cannot say, I mean, it will continue. The injustice is injustice. And Sukarno was just the man who brought it on the podia, who fought against it in public. And then you can capture him, but the movement will still continue.
Yes, I agree. And if I'm not wrong, yes, you can continue for a moment.
Sukarno built up a good staff. He had Hatta, but his generals as well. Sudirman, Yani, Ahmed Yani, they were good generals. They had trust with their people. So he was also a very good strategist. He know how to connect people. He know how to collect the best people. So maybe that is why the Dutch were really afraid of him, and that's why they named him a terrorist, because he was dangerous for the Dutch interests, of course, and he had the people behind him because he was reasonable.
Yes, of
if
course.
somebody wants something with arguments that are not reasonable, you lose your support. But if you have reasonable arguments, your support will remain.
Of course.
So,
yeah.
And that's also the proof that he was right.
Okay. And there is a message from my friend. He want to make some statement, Amos. Okay, Amos, maybe you can make your statement in here. Hello, Amos. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello. It's clear. My voice is clear.
Yeah, we can hear you from here. Richard, can you hear Amos?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Continue.
Yeah, I think the main issues here is very interesting. About decolonization. I think we must think it. We must think seriously about decolonization issues, because the problem of decolonization is there is something like discourse or something like colonial framework that continue until now. And I think the task of Indonesian historian, I think it's to criticize the colonial framework in every field of study, especially in Arungkala study circle, or in history as a study field in general. I think that must be our concern. Jadi kupikir dekolonisasi ini isu yang harus kita seriuskan bersama ya dalam konteks ini, bagaimana melihat sejarah, bagaimana melihat konstruksi wacana tentang sejarah itu memiliki banyak muatan-muatan dan memiliki banyak bias-bias ya tentang kolonisasi begitu. And I think this film about Westerling, it's like opening for us in Indonesian, especially in public sphere. As we know, film is very effective way to introducing people to our history, and I think in 45 until 49 period in our history, the historian can doing much work about this period, and I think this movie is great example for us. That's my simple statement about our discussion today. Thank you, Artaki and Richard and Remizar.
Okay, thank you so much. Almost. Richard, you want to say something?
Yes, about the history. I know that now there is a joint investigation with Dutch historians and Indonesian historians to write a new history book, that they see the conflict from both sides. And I think there's an ongoing project at this moment. So there is cooperation, and so that we can learn about the history from the Indonesian point of view, because history is always written by the victors, and they write it as good as possible for their interest. But now I think I heard there's a research from as well Indonesia as the Dutch in this compared to this history. So maybe for the future more details will be known.
Okay, thank you so much for your statement. We know that tadi Richard menyampaikan kalau misalnya ada usaha gabungan dari sejarawan dari Belanda dan Indonesia untuk menulis secara gabungan historiografi baru gitu, yang mengakomodasi kedua belah pihak. Mungkin yang tadi maybe one point that you say I was kind of confused is history written by the victor, because both sides can claim victory, you know. Indonesia can claim victory because they are having independence, but from military perspective, the Dutch is winning, you know, from the coalitional action. They the one who winning against the Indonesian military, but that topic from for another time. Okay, right? Maybe you have another statement, no? Enough? Why you have?
I agree with Amos' statement
Uh,
about the importance of decolonialism issues.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Decolonization issue. Okay. I also quite agree because we often have discussion about decolonization, that many things need to be decolonized in Indonesia. Recently, Amos also want to make a study about white color. White color. I mean the skin color. You know that white is colonial, apa warna putih itu kayak bawaan dari kolonialisme, you know. White is being perceived as beautiful. It's came from the colonial era maybe, yeah. The one that you want to take another time as a discussion, that it carry until this day, that many people want to be white, you know, especially women, they will bleach or they use skincare something like that to be white. That's came from the colonial, because you know from before the colonial era, most people maybe just have brown, dark, or even black color. That's a discussion for another time. I think Amos will help it with his friend. Most of them women. I think they will launch that discussion, but that's for another time. Okay, this discussion about let's chat in here. Okay, from Donda, that kind of whitening skincare, are you using it, Donda? Whitening skincare? That's come from the colonial, okay? Don't do that, maybe.
Well, it has a more deeper meaning, because here in Europe, in Holland, the people want to get brown.
Oh yes, yes, that's I often hear about.
Yeah, but actually, it's also with the term what they say blue blood. It is because of the white
Yeah.
skin. The people who were rich didn't have to work on the land, so they did not suffer for the sun or whatsoever. They could stay indoors, and that's why they are whiter than the people who are working on the land. The peasants, they were browner, and that was a distinction to see. Oh, you are rich and you are poor. Maybe that is the cause that people want to be white. I don't know, but people in Holland, they want to get brown.
Okay.
I mean,
That's
I don't know.
I also learned about that. Okay. From discussion, maybe if you want to go deeper, you can see me in camera, right? If you want to read more, yang hadir di sini mungkin kalau misalnya ingin baca lebih lanjut ya mengenai era ini, perspektif dari Belanda misalnya, ini ada buku dari Gert of Indie. If you Richard want to learn more, there is a book from Gert of Indie, Serdadu Belanda di Indonesia, Dutch Soldier in Indonesia, 1945 to 1950. 1945 sampai 1950. Ini cukup menarik sih mengenai mengenai tentara Belanda di Indonesia, catatan dari mereka, dan juga di sini ada pengantar mengenai. Okay.
There are two people who raise questions. There are two people who raised their hand.
Okay, okay. I noticed it from Mr. Stefano or Mr. Nanda. Which was I don't notice it. Maybe from Mr. Nanda. You want to say something?
Yes. Good evening, Richard. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this discussion. It's really interesting. I have questions that is bothering my mind about the statement of that the Dutch military man is coming to Asia or Indonesia because they look for job because the situations of economically in Holland.
I'm sorry. Sorry, there is gangguan. Mungkin ada Mr. Nanda. Can you speak again? I don't hear your voice before.
Yes. Thank you. So yeah, back to my questions regarding the film and what Richard said a few moments ago about the military man from Dutch military man that came to Indonesia is because they are looking for job. It's not volunteering to defend the country, and then there's this really consistent that military definitions is actually a group of people who given the power to defend something, means that to defend their countries. And then the cross of the movie itself, they're talking about one soldiers that is for me is the term is he was trapped because he joined the military and went to Indonesia, and then and the goal is actually to make the peaceful situations at the time, but the fact that it's actually to trap in the war, in the real war. And then I see that the film itself, the questions is maybe Richard or you guys can help me. What is actually the message of the film itself, talking about the morality? Because as long as my understanding, if people join the military and then Richard has said that it's a top-down command that the below staff cannot refuse the top of the leader. Even what we see from the movie is the movie itself is present about Westerlings during the special ops or special operations in Sulawesi. This is a bit confusing for me because the morality of message in the film is not emphasized. So So what is actually the Johan the soldiers that he trapped in the real war? And then talking about the film, I understand that the producer or even the director wants to present the fact of the history itself, but again, it doesn't seem that talking about the genocides of the operations that conducted by or carried out by Westerling is giving the morality of the film itself. So can you give me more insights about the films? So talking about it's really interesting about talking about the fact about the story, but again, what is the message of the real message of the films? If we talk about decolonize and freedom of the country and the agreement from the allies to the Europe, if they help Europe from the German, then they have to make freedom to the country that they are colonized. But again, there's still a war. There was a war at a time, and there was also the quote unquote is I don't know the exact term, but it's let's talk about the killing massively or genocide, and also one of the contrast things between the military men, Dutch military men look for job, but actually they thrive into the real war, and then turns to the operations in Western itself. So thank you, and that was my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nanda, for your question. And another question is from Mr. Stefano Brando. Maybe you can ask your question, and then Richard or Ray, depending on the who is being asked, will answer it, and maybe we can end the discussion. Okay, Mr. Stefano.
Yes. Um, Good evening, everybody. My name is Stefano. I'm from Jakarta. Um, Mr. Richard invited me to join this discussion, and I think I'm excited to join this discussion. And actually, I don't watch this movie yet, but I think this movie is great. And in my opinion, learn historic is important. Based on this, I think the colonization of the Dutch, okay, it's already happened, but I think the main of the colonization is they want to expand their power, I think. But yeah, maybe there's a lot of people colonized in that country. Maybe United Kingdom colonized in United States and other states. But I think the whole thing is the main of the colonization is to expand their power to the states that they colonized. And I think this movie would bring us in the Indonesian, especially we as a young people in here, to get more detailed information about the diplomatic relation between Dutch and Indonesia. I think it's great. And also, I hope that someday this movie will reflection this situation between Indonesian and Dutch. I think, yeah. I only give my statement no question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Stefano, for your
Yes, thank
statement.
you. Yes.
Okay, maybe Richard, you want to answer the question and make statement about what just being said uh, by Mr. Stefano. Okay,
Yes.
you can start it from now, and then maybe the discussion can be end because it's been late in Indonesia. Okay.
Okay. Stefano is right, of course, that colonization is, of course, empowering, getting more power. But the aim, the goal of that power is, of course, to get more wealth. To say, okay, they come to Indonesia and they get rich because of the products of Indonesia, who actually were owned by the people. But the products, the main reason for colonization is to expand your power, but also the much power you have, the more wealth you got. It is with all kingdoms, also European kingdoms, with France, Scotland, England. They all had that. Germany, Hungary. If you look at the history of Europe, you see actually a lot of smaller kingdoms. They get alliances with other kingdoms to expand their power. And then you see this one does it for the grain, the other do it for the charcoal, the other do it for iron ore. There's always some kind of economical reason to benefit them is behind that. They want to enlarge the power, but also their wealth to get more rich. That is actually a way to legalize stealing. And maybe it's strange to know, but Indonesia had to pay to the Dutch a sum of about, if I'm correct, 4 billion euros as payoff. So Indonesia became independent, but they had to pay 4 billion euros and they paid till 1999 or something. And that is a bit awkward because the Dutch plundered or get wealthy because of Indonesia, and then Indonesia became independent. Then Indonesia have to pay to the Dutch because of the loss of their income. It's the same if you have a cocaine business and you do it for 10 years and then you're captured by the police and you say, hey, I claim you because you captured me. Now my income is gone, so you have to pay me benefits. But it happened. Indonesia paid the Dutch a couple of billion euros just to as a price for the independence. And okay, that is an arrogance that you say you have to pay me. I thought it would be the other way around. The Dutch had to pay Indonesia because of the damage they caused, but Indonesia had to pay the Dutch because the loss of economic benefits. That is, in my opinion, also an example of the colonial way of thinking. How can you think like that? That you say, okay, we occupy your country, we got rich from it, but now you want us to leave, but you have to pay me to a compensation of the loss for criminal activities. It is a bit strange, but that's history. It happened, and that also shows the way they think. There was nothing you can do about it. But it's a good what Steph said. This history has to be known. Also with the Dutch, it was we had a lot of reactions about this movie here in the Netherlands. A lot of people, Dutch people, didn't even know about this. So it's not only for people in Indonesia another new information about history, but also for many Dutch people, especially the younger generation, they did not know about this as well. And the general opinion is that the Dutch youth of now say, the generation of now say, how could they do that? The Dutch, it's not just what they have done. So there's a shift of time. We don't accept everything. The younger generation doesn't accept that anymore. And this is real good to open the dialogue between Indonesia and Netherlands. A lot of things are too painful to talk about. We still have a lot of people here in the Netherlands alive who were involved in the independence war or in the Besiap, who suffered, who were in the camps. And of course, they have their sentiments and their emotions. And that is why it took a little while before we can talk about this. But maybe this film can be a start in a better communication and an honest communication about the history, because what is wrong. You can't change that. And what had happened has happened. You can change it as well. But it's now to start to realize that, to understand it, and now to move on. And I think actually that the Dutch have more problems with this issue than the Indonesians. Because when I'm in Indonesia, I was always afraid of about this period that they could blame us, but not at all, not at all. So I think there's also something to give more information about that. The people in Indonesia think differently about our history than the Dutch people themselves, because when the prime minister once mentioned in a speech the term VOC, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, he was in the press, he was punished for that, because the VOC is a black page in the history with the Banda murders and everything. It has a negative intonation. But in Indonesia, if you talk about the VOC, people are reminded that. And for me, that is
Yes, yeah.
strange
We had a
experience.
lot of discussion about the LCS.
Yeah. So there's a lot of unknown things between us, and maybe this can open the dialogue better. And it started with the research of the history
So
by the Dutch and Indonesians.
oh yes, so the film can be used as a new way for discussion between the Indonesian and the Dutch. Richard, think like that. So, Mr. Nanda, is your question has been answered yet, or is it enough or not?
Well, thank you, Richard. I think it is quite interesting discussions, and yes, quite answering my questions. But I hope someday that we can talk more and then discuss. And it's really like really great conversations with you and with the Arunkala teams. And then thank you for that. And yeah, I agree that it's often the new mindsets of the generations to see what was in the war and then start to move on, that we can anticipate that there's no war, no more war in the world, and then people can live peacefully.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Nanda Arya, for coming to this discussion, and thank you so much for Mr. Bernico also had made some question, and also from Mr. Stefano also
Thank you.
make some question, and especially to our presenter also, Ray. Oh, you want to make some statement, Ray?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You can make your statement in here.
My last statement is I can when Hegel said we can learn from history that people don't really learn from history.
Okay. That's your
Yeah.
statement from Hegel?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you so much.
Maybe-
Oh, what is the title of the book from Hegel?
The phenomenology of spirit. So
Okay, okay.
our topic tonight is of decolonization issues.
Yes.
That a really interesting topic for talking about now. Then the Oost can be a new perspective for the Dutch historiography. So kind of the best movie in my life, maybe.
Okay, okay, thank you so much, Ray.
Yep.
Okay, Richard.
Yep.
Maybe you want to have some statement before we end the discussion, and we can, if in Indonesia, we want. This is already almost 21 o'clock. So, what is the result? You want to make some statement first? Oh, it's enough from you. Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Richard, for having attended this meeting, become our presenter, and give us some new perspective from those people who live in Dutch, and also know about historiography in there, and also from my friend Ray to be presenter in this discussion. Thank you so much for your hard work, and from all of you who had attended this discussion, thank you so much, and those who give question to us. Jadi terima kasih bagi teman-teman semua, terutama tadi bertanya, Mr. Nanda, juga Mas Berniko tadi udah nanya juga, sama Dari Mas Stefano juga udah bertanya pada presenter, Mas Rimizat sama Mr. Richard. Terima kasih banyak. Oke, sudah? Selesai diskusinya sudah selesai. Oke, mau di foto dulu sebentar? Mungkin.
Dokumen dong.
Oh, mau dokumentasi. Siapa? Lana mungkin dokumentasi sebentar, Lana, sebelum akhirnya kita akhiri diskusinya. Sudah cukup malam kalau di Indonesia, mungkin teman-teman mau beristirahat. Oh yes, thank you for your question. Yes, I had some Moluccan blood and also Buton and also Sundanese, so I'm quite Nusantara in a simple way. Hybrid. Sundanese noble, but Bantenese noble, and Moluccan and Buton. Thank you so much for asking about my ancestry. I'm quite proud about that. Okay, my friend and from IT can make the documentation. Oke. Siapa yang mau menghitung?
Oke, yuk. 1.
Oke. Gimana? Kamu yang hitung, Ray, mungkin?
Oke. Ayo main di ini. Udah siap ya?
Udah siap belum?
Oke.
Please turn on the camera, all of you, for the documentation. Okay, thank you.
We see all faces. Woohoo!
Okay, you can see their face now. Okay, user.
Oke.
Okay.
Yo. Come on.
Okay. Always. Oh, Lana, please take documentation, Lana. Asam. Lana. Documentation so people can. Have you taken documentation, Lana? Okay, please count it, Lana, so we can hear it. Tolong dihitung, Lana, jadi kita bisa dengar dan juga memberikan dokumentasi kita pada film kita. Oke, Lana, silakan.
Udah ya. 1, 2, 3. Di screenshotin dong. Fish.
Oke, thank you so much for all of you who had attended this meeting. Makasih semuanya yang udah datang di diskusi malam ini. Semoga kalau misalnya Arum Kalang ngadain lagi, kalian juga bisa hadir lagi. Makasih kepada presenter juga malam ini. Diskusinya bisa diakhiri ini. Terima kasih, selamat malam semuanya. Bisa meninggalkan meeting dan beristirahat atau melanjutkan pekerjaan. Terima kasih. Selamat malam. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Ray and Richard.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Danke, thank you so much. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Stefano.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you also for Mr. Arya, Donda. Thank you, Richard, for being our presenter tonight. Thank you so much. Okay, mau tinggalin atau gimana?
Okay.
Maybe we can end the discussion if you want to leave the meeting. Kalau misalnya meninggalkan diskusi meeting roomnya, silahkan. Terima kasih udah hadir. Richard, kalau misalnya Richard, if you want to end the discussion, exit from meeting and continue your work, you can do that. And other people, because it's already been 29 o'clock in here. And I don't know what time is it in Netherlands, but if you want to continue work, you can do that. I'm sorry, I can hear you. Your mic was muted.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
Just one remark, strange thing. Politicians decide to go to start a war.
Oh yes.
And we have to fight it. I mean.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Maybe.
So it is not personal. Stupid. It's stupid.
Okay.
It's just stupid.
Thank you so much. Okay. Mbak Donda masih ada?
Ya.
Masih, biar.
Okay, yes, Donda, you're welcome. Hello. Mas Birawa juga masih ada.
So, Mr. Richard,
Oh, you
when
want to
you
talk
want
about
to no,
Japanese?
when you want to go Java?
Maybe after pandemic.
Well, as pulang ke Semarang.
Yeah.
Ya, harus tunggu pandemi ya.
Oh,
Yeah.
What if you arrive in here, we will greet you.
Yeah.
Ya, kita akan menjamu Anda.
Yeah, I've been in Jogja several times. I know Jogja. So I will visit you, sure. But
Okay.
the world is getting bigger now because we cannot travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, now, I mean, 2-3 years ago, within 24 hours, within 24 hours from here, The Hague, my house, to my place in Semarang is within 24 hours. The plane to Jakarta is only 17 hours, then 2 hours to Semarang. Within 24 hours, I'm in Semarang. But now jauh. Now so far away, you cannot go there. So
Udah, punya kamu. Soalnya punya aku harus dari Mas.
Okay. Wait. There is some trouble here. I can't hear your voice clearly. Hello?
yeah, hello, are you talking to me? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there is some problem with my connection, maybe. Okay. So, what you are doing right now? Hello?
Hello. You're still in line.
Okay.
Are there any questions or remarks left?
Do you have any question or something to say?
Overall, I think I would say thank you very much, Richard, for joining us in our discussion, and I think it's very important for us as a history history student in Indonesia to rethink our knowledge about Indonesian history, specifically in decolonization issues. And I think a lot of my friend and my colleague here, it's it's very grateful that our discussion today it's deep and serious to talk about decolonization. And I think the main important things is very brave, right?
Yeah.
Because in our college life as a young historian, a lot of things forbidden to discuss, specifically in these issues. And I think it's it can be a good start for more criticism in our history. Historical studies. So once again, thank you so much, Richard, for your participation. I'm sorry, ngeblank.
Okay, we'll meet again.
Yeah, till we meet again. I hope we can meet in Indonesia or in.
Oh yeah.
Den Haag.
I guess when you come to The Hague, I'm in Semarang.
Mato Gopi.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
We'll meet you next time. You can
Okay.
organize more about this topic. There are more topics
Yes.
connected to this, of course.
Yeah.
Neocolonialism, the colonialism between the West and the East. What you see now with the pandemic, with the rich countries have all the vaccines, and the poor countries have problems with getting the vaccines. It's actually
Yeah.
also a form of colonialism.
Yes.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay,
In-
maybe
in-
we can meet in another time and with
yeah,
another topic, so
yeah,
it will be
we
interesting.
can we can
Okay.
do that.
I
Okay,
so
let's do it.
yeah.
Ayo.
Okay,
Thank you so
okay,
much.
guys, meet
Terima
you next
kasih
time.
banyak.
Hmm.
Thank you
Bye
well,
bye.
Mr. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.